Rose, thank you so much for joining us here at FundForum International. Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
You've been talking a lot about customer engagement, where we're at in this industry in terms of staying relevant, and the large swathes of the population that still don't invest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been talking today about globalization and big themes like big data and neuroscience and, aging population, what that means to the asset management industry. But, ultimately, what does that mean for the customer? What does that mean for that individual that's taking their money each month and saving into their pensions and their ISAs and their long-term savings? And how can the benefits of automation and AI actually feed their way through into better customer outcomes? I think that's really, really important.
Tech can be a great enabler, but people are also quite sceptical about giving over their data and things. So what developments need to happen there?
Yeah, I think that, data's here to stay. It's here to drive efficiencies, and we know that. I think that, like you say, people are still very, very concerned about handing over their data. When we understand and appreciate where the value exchange is around, if I give you my data, what does that mean for me? So whether it's putting a black box in a car, that means I'll drive a little bit slower, which means my premiums on my insurance will be less, then that's interesting. And maybe I'm happy to share my data on that basis. Where you can't see where the value exchange is, i.e. why would an asset management want my data when I don't really feel like I have a relationship with an asset manager, that's where it falls down.
Talking about that data and the use of it, some companies are using that data to look at our health and well-being and how we're living our lives to sort of drive investment as well. That's an interesting area. And can this industry have a real influence in the well-being of society, if you like?
I believe so. I think it's in our gift to do so. And I think if we look at more of an ecosystem approach, so how can asset managers work with health and well-being providers to use that data and partner with insurers and really create an ecosystem, understanding what it is that the customer wants. I need to make sure I have sufficient income to retire on. I need to advance some of my inheritance early to my millennial children because they can't afford to buy a property. So what that means is assets will not stay with asset managers for as long, or maybe as remain sticky, but work with an insurance provider or a health provider who can maybe insure against the risk of someone getting ill, or maybe help them save and understand when they're going to need to pass on money. Then all of a sudden, we as a community or an ecosystem become more relevant and valuable to that customer.
Is it really realistic, though, to expect this industry to become some sort of philanthropic body? They are a commercial body trying to make money at the end of the day, aren't they?
It's true, and we are all in it for the business. We are here to be commercial, but we need to understand what generates our revenue. At the end of the day, it's generated by customers taking their 10, 50, 100,000 pound a month and putting it into policies, selling businesses, investing it into different sorts of investments in order to make us commercially viable. So in order to be relevant to those customers, ensure that they have a mechanism to retire and sort of build an ecosystem for their benefit. If you can show value and if you can demonstrate that you are a partner of a broader ecosystem but actually contributing value to that customer, then why wouldn't you participate?
There are big sections of society that this industry are still missing out on and not engaging with, and that would be those with lower income who just don't invest because they perhaps don't see it as something they can afford to do,
Yeah.
and women.
Yeah.
What would you like to see happen in those areas, and what's realistic?
Well, so this is a really, really important subject to me when it comes from, I'd say, it's not even diverse groups, it's kind of like the non-traditional. Women make up 50% of the population. We know that women take career breaks, but 2/3 of them come back to work full or part-time. They contribute, they have an income, and they need to retire. We know that when they're not working and not paying into their pensions, there's a pensions gap, so not only is a pay gap, a pensions gap, and that has a ripple effect that impacts the whole of society and our well-being and our health moving into sort of later life. So I think there's a real need for us to engage women, be relevant to women, to engage young people and to be relevant to millennials. We talk about how post RDR and sort of with regulatory requirements, it's really challenging for advisors to give advice and be commercially viable to someone that wants to put £100 a month into their ISA. Because the days of commission have gone. We need to figure it out. We absolutely do. We need to use technology. We've got robo-advice coming in as an alternative, but it's not quite hitting the mark. We've got gamification that's engaging people, so people are being educated and becoming more aware, but we're not quite tipping them over the edge to take action. So we need to be better at getting those messages out, giving people reasons why they need to do it and need to do it now, and risks of delaying, sort of like putting some money away and building your own financial resilience.
If the commercial motivation isn't there for these businesses to tap into those disenfranchised areas of society, do you think there should be a mechanism that forces that to happen? Is that a realistic proposition?
I'd say yes and no. I think if you look at commercial housing and how, builders and developers are forced to have sort of like a certain segment of their housing dedicated to lower income families, that works in that space. Could that work in our space? Could asset managers be forced to charge less for a certain demographic of the population? In principle, anything's possible. Would that work? I question whether it would work. I think but I do think that a heavy hand will come upon us to force us to do something, and that's what regulation is. And regulation comes in forms when regulators feel that we aren't taking care of the things that we need to be taken care of. The opposite, one of the unintended consequences of that is, if you look at RDR, you've got the advice gap. So a number of the reduction in the amount of advisors, so therefore fewer people are actually getting advice. They're trying to use robo or self-select. They're not actually engaging against a backdrop of a transfer of risk from the state to us as individuals. Pension freedoms, we are empowered to make decisions around our pensions. We are paralysed about doing it because we don't know what to do, and without advisors helping fill that gap, we're in a worse situation. So with that gap and those people that don't know what to do, will regulation sort of like fill that gap? I mean, I don't know what the solution is, but also on the other hand, you've got disruptors and innovators coming in, and they're just trying to take the breakfast, if you like, lunch and dinner of the asset managers, because we as an industry appear to be standing around doing the same thing over and over again with the same results on a shrinking population. So, if we don't start looking through a different lens or thinking outside of the box, innovators will come, so we need to encourage their new thinking and incorporate it into ours to make sure we are relevant to all segments of society.
A good warning to end on there. Thank
Yes.
you, Rose. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.